James Rousseau, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the CoreLink Solution, where we look to empower you through awareness and actionable insights. On this episode, I am pleased to be joined by Tommy Sardine. Tommy comes from a background of more than 20 years in law enforcement, most notably working within the Dade County prison system. He shares some of what I would characterize as not just a working journey, but a humanitarian journey. See, he helped establish and install policies within the prison system where they did not exist or comply with state regulations. I mean, think of common things such as air conditioning, the distribution of food, bedding, etc. All the things that we would expect or take for granted. He further talks about the recidivism rates, which is the percentage of people that return to prison after being released, which was a huge challenge and continues to be today, quite frankly. We then shift the discussion to his journey as an entrepreneur, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So sit back and buckle up as we're about to link up with Tommy Sardine. So I want to welcome to the CoreLink Solution a good friend and colleague, Tommy Sardine, hailing from the great state of Florida. How you doing?
Great.
We are in, if you wonder why we're dressed down, we are in Montego Bay, Jamaica, enjoying the sun. But Tommy was gracious enough to take some time away from the family, the pool, the beach, skydiving, anything else you can do in Jamaica to talk with us for a little bit. So Tommy, why don't you introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your background and what you're doing now?
Well, originally from New York, born in Brooklyn, New York, raised in Brooklyn, out Cambridge Heights, Queens, and also down in the Caribbean, St. Martin. Used to live there for a while. Background's in law enforcement. That's what I did for 20 years. But prior to that, did just about everything from security, managing stores from Carvel's to Eckerd Drugs, whatever it was. Sometimes had 3 jobs, worked in daycare centers with kids and actually cooked in the kitchen for the kids, worked in community colleges in the kitchen, also baked. My father had a bakery down in St. Martin, so I was a baker also. So I did a little bit of everything. So background though, but for 20 years straight was in law enforcement. Was a training officer, wrote policies and procedures for the Dade County jails, and did a lot of great things in Dade County with them.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Tommy is 2 things. He had a path whereby he could be doing something totally different now. Like some of the people he knew when he grew up, and some people I knew when I grew up, where he could be lost and still on the street, sleeping on the blanket, on a curb somewhere. He could be dead or a whole other bunch of things. But because of a number of different things and decisions he made in his life, he's here enjoying a different life with his family. Secondarily, though, not only that, he's done a lot of different things that I believe probably help thousands of people probably because of the things he's institutionalized during his time working in the prison system. So I think we could spend some time really going deep into some of those things, man. So I would love for you to start things you did in the Dade County prison system. Maybe even just start with what were some of the first realizations that, man, this system has some opportunities here. There are some things we can fix. What were your first realizations of, there's some things we can fix?
Well, hey, things we could fix when I first actually started writing policies. For them with Dade County. Some of the facilities didn't have policies. They had memos, memos on things that had to be done, to things you should follow, but they weren't policies. They weren't actually specifics. And that's what I started doing. They had an accreditation bureau that was working on that. They had 1 facility that was accredited, which was a women's facility. But other than that, none of the other facilities were accredited or had guidelines and policies that officers can.
So is a memo like a quick stopgap Band-Aid kind of thing?
Yeah,
is that a memo?
Yeah, that's all they did was if something happened, they wrote a memo. Don't do that.
Okay.
So it wasn't something how to do it. It was like, okay, this happened. Okay, this is what we're not going to do.
Okay.
But it wasn't to how to accomplish that task
correctly. Got it.
According to the state statutes.
Okay.
And that's where we came in. I came in at actually taking a state statute with the guidelines that they said had to have, from lighting in the cell to the height of the bunk from the floor, to the air conditioning being a certain temperature,
right?
From the food being delivered to the cell and the timely manner, from the diabetics getting their snack before so they don't go into a diabetic shock. Right. So all those things they didn't have policies written for.
Wow.
So that's what, I read the 33-8, that was a statute that we had to abide by for the county jails. The state prisons was Chapter 33.
Got it.
And -8 meant for the county.
Now, when was this approximately? What year was this?
Well, I started in 1984.
Okay.
The system was a lot different than it is now.
Sure.
They used to feed a lot differently. Food was different. Behavior was different from officers and inmates compared to the way it is now.
Right.
Now you have, you never thought about having 100 inmates in a room with 1 or 2 officers by themselves.
Right.
And now that's the way you house a new generation jailing.
Right. So back then, higher ratios, officer to inmates, right?
Well, not no. The ratio was different because they had them in cells. The inmates were in cells. You might have had 30 inmates in a cell, but they were confined, and the officers was in a wing, was outside of it.
Okay.
So they just walked around the perimeter and looked inside. So there was a lot more of things happening with inmates within the cell that the officers didn't see.
Right.
So new generation jail stops a lot of the preying on the weak like it was in the past.
Got it.
So those are some of the things, and then we had policies to help with that. But the past jails, there was a lot of abuse being happening with the inmates. The strong taking advantage of the weak, from even taking their food to physically abusing them, things like that.
Got it. And was that the thrust of a lot of what your responsibilities were in terms of policies, trying to help improve the safety of the inmates? And what was that?
And it's safety of the inmates and the safety of the officers.
Okay.
Doing their job in a safe manner, not walking in front of them. It's different things that they had to do, even trained in the academy, but you get lax when you're doing things, but also the environment that we had in the jail system.
Right.
Because you work a new generation jail is totally different than working the regular system that we had.
Right.
So just writing the policies and on how things had to be done, from the way you handle the inmate to the way you release them.
Got it.
So, which, they were memos, but they weren't policies step by step on what you had to do.
Right. That made its way through training and got institutionalized, et cetera.
Right. And documentation. They didn't have the documentation. That was key. And you had abuse in every area. You had officers that abused inmates. Besides the inmates abusing inmates, but you had the officers that. So we had to have policies in place that they didn't take advantage of those inmates either.
Right.
A lot of people in jail that don't really need to be there.
Right. What was your, as you started working through this, what were some of the aha moments for you? What were some of the things that surprised you the most?
Oh, well, what surprised me is how they didn't have those guidelines, and surprising the people you had to deal with over the years, and being there for so many years, seeing the recidivism rate. You work a facility, even though I was in the training bureau and accreditation, I was in the facility a lot at some time, but even when I went in there, worked overtime, because anytime you wanted more money, you had to work overtime. Right. So I would go and work overtime and work details.
Right.
And you see the inmate, he got released, but then he's back again.
Right.
Or his brother's back again.
Right.
And you just, it's like it's a revolving door that doesn't stop.
Now explain, because I don't want to assume everybody understands the whole, recidivism and the concept. Maybe just explain what recidivism is for folks.
Well, recidivism is those individuals that the environment that they're in, out there in real life, that environment brings them right back into the jail. Because they come to jail for committing a crime, they're in jail, and now they go back out, but they're going back in that same environment that they were in. And it doesn't change their habits, doesn't change their behavior. So they turn around and they come back into the jail again.
Right.
And it may be because their brother is a career criminal, or their father, or their friends, and now they hang around that same crowd, that same group, and they start coming back again. Right. And you see it over and over and over again. I've seen guys, for the 20 years I was there, I've seen guys come in and out of that system for 20 years.
Right.
I mean, when they were teenagers and now they're adults, because we used to house teenagers at a juvenile floor. And they came in as a juvenile, and then they come back as an adult.
Right.
And they just keep going in and out, in and out.
From your perspective, and how long ago did you leave working in the prison system?
2004.
2004.
From 84 to 2004.
So 20 years. So Were the policies geared in such a way, or a certain percentage of them, to lend themselves towards improving recidivism?
Yes, they had programs in place. You know, they had guidance counselors, as you call them. But they had counselors, people in place. They had programs to try to help those individuals. But what my experience was, they had those programs when they're there. They were training them, some GED programs. They had programs with small engine, teaching them how to work on vehicles and stuff like that.
Sure.
But when they got back into that same environment, you know, a small percentage never came back.
Got it.
But a larger percentage always came back.
Got it.
And they're plugged back into that program again. It might be they were on drugs and they plug into the drug program, or they plug into, you know, the religious programs, and they're doing great. Then they come out, they do good for a while, but if they don't get away from that environment, they come back.
Got it. Okay.
And seen that over the years, and it's a shame. And they don't have a choice because where they're going to live.
Right. So for people listening to the program, sounds like one of the things is if you have a family member that is incarcerated, and if they come out, they need a dramatic shift in environment to be successful in staying out.
They need that. So there's nothing out there for them.
Right.
You know, there's different halfway houses or whatever it is, but they're not, you're putting them in an environment with the same type of people.
Right.
So there's not a system in place that I knew of back then. I don't know about now, but back then, that when they were released, that they could get into a program that could get them away from that environment.
Right. Got it. Okay. So after 20 years, then you make a change, and because I know I was introduced to you as one of the premier entrepreneurs I've known now for about 4 years. So tell me about the shift from that work into becoming an entrepreneur. How'd you make that shift?
Yeah, that shift was many years ago. I mean, because I was a workaholic. I'd worked jobs. I mean, came down to Florida in 1977 for a wedding, and my sister went back and resigned from my job in New York because I saw the lifestyle was different in Florida for my kids, because I was able to, you know, instead of them going to the park, you know, because I lived up in the Bronx, but still you go into the park and got them in the sprinklers and the guy is selling drugs across the park there. I wanted to get them out of that environment.
Right.
So when I saw Florida, that, hey, you can, same price I was paying for something up there, they can have a better environment. They have a clubhouse, a pool, and gym. And I was like, man, this is great for the kids. So I left New York and came down here and got into managing gas stations at the time. Had a job doing that, and left that and went into Union Carbide, distribution coordinator with gases and chemicals. And then my dad was a baker. He had a bakery in St. Martin, and said, well, he needed help. And I was the only son at the time that could bake. So I went down to St. Martin to help him and to build up the bakery down there, and did that for a few years, and ended up coming back to Florida.
Right.
Got back into management with Eckerd Drugs, managing Eckerd Drugs. And hours were crazy. I mean, putting in, 60, 70, 80 hours sometimes. And when the opportunity arose, I always wanted to get into law enforcement, because I was in security in New York. I was assistant chief of security in New York with ports and terminals there. And I ended up applying for Dade County for corrections and police.
Gotcha.
And back then you had to take a test. So I took the test, passed it, and they called me.
Gotcha.
And I started doing that full time.
When was that around approximately?
That was in 84.
84, okay.
I started in 84.
Right.
And got in there, and the entrepreneurship started when actually my wife came home and said that want to go to a meeting, an Amway meeting. I said, no, we ain't. I saw that already. I ain't doing that. But we have a good relationship. We married now this year 31 years.
Right.
So I support her. She supports me.
Sure.
So I went to the meeting and it made sense, So I said, I always want to do things for myself. I worked in the bakery. My father had a bakery. So I started doing Amway with it. And that, took that for about 7 years. Didn't make any money, but the best person development, because that's when I really got engaged with personal development. Okay. In New York, I read a book called I'm Okay, You're Okay, and that got me going back into college and stuff. And then when I got into Amway, that was, a monthly book. and we started reading books, and that got me into personal development, and we did Amway, and then got out of Amway from a car accident one day going to a meeting. I said, man, I'm chasing this dollar. It don't make sense. And stopped it and started doing what we ended up doing another company. Helped a gentleman develop a networking company for cosmetics called Sasha Cosmetics out of Trinidad. And that it did well for a little bit, but then 9/11 hit. We had a kiosk in the mall, and that went down. At the same time, we signed up with Legal Shield back then, prepaid legal. So we were always looking to make more. So we signed up for that and started doing that. But the personal development was always there. And that's what kept us looking and kept us going. You know, as I said, I've done so many jobs, working 2 and 3 jobs as an officer. I had 2 jobs. Had a gentleman I ran into, and he had a contract with Nabisco.
Right. And
he couldn't get anyone to go into the inner city in Florida, into Liberty City and Overtown. I didn't care. I grew up in the inner city in New York, so it didn't matter to me. So he was a Spanish guy, and he had accounts that couldn't get service. So I would service his accounts in the morning, and then I would go to work, correction from 3 to 11. Then when I got off at 11 o'clock, I did security with my complex until the morning, so I didn't have to pay rent. So I was hustling. So I did whatever it took.
Right.
And it's all personal development. I mean, if you're not reading, if you're not around the right people, and trust me, I've been around people that, even in law enforcement, that tell me that it's not going to work or this not going to work, wanted me to go down different tracks, because trust me, law enforcement, you have that small percentage, that's not all good.
Right.
And as Jim Rome says, they move around a lot, but you just have to have that willpower, and it's being around more positive than negative.
Yes.
Because even in law enforcement, even today, seeing what's going on out there in law enforcement, it's a small percentage,
right?
But they shout loud,
right?
And we have to do something about that.
Yes, yeah, that's good. So one of the things I hear you saying pretty assertively is the personal development. Helped a lot, and you got engaged with it. Sound like as you slid more into looking at Amway forward, and you have 2 sons, right?
Yes.
2 sons. What ages are your sons?
Well, I actually have 3 sons.
3 sons, okay.
And a daughter, because I was a single dad for a while.
Okay.
When I met Ingrid. My oldest son is 44, and my daughter is 43. And the 2 sons that is Daniel, he's 26, he just got married 2 weeks ago, and Nathaniel, he's 29. So Daniel, though, is he's excelled more in the business side, on the personal development side.
Right.
Nathaniel is he's a go-getter. He's a more people person. He gets along with people, makes friends. But Danny, he's more on the personal development side. And I was sharing with you, at one time I told him, they were in high school. Well, he was in high school, and Daniel was in middle school. And I told Nathaniel, I said, look, I'll pay you $100 for every book. I want you to read 12 books.
Right.
So at the end of the year, you have $1,200. I'll pay you cash. Every month you read a book, and I'm going to ask you because I read those books. Right. So I'm going to quiz you on those books, and I know if you read them or not. He said, Daddy, I don't like to read. But now Danny on the side says, Daddy, I'll read them all for the $1,200.
You paying? Absolutely. You paying? I'll read them.
So I didn't give him the opportunity because he was younger. He was too young at that time. But his first book that he read, I think he was probably 9 or 10, was the 1 Minute Manager. And he read that to do a report. And he just likes personal development. So he's been reading books ever since, and he's excelled in the business. Right. Just got married, has his own place now, and doing well. So with his fiance, she does real estate, and he does real estate with her now. Right. And he does Legal Shield. He's a regional manager down in Florida. Got it. So, but great kids, and my oldest son, he does Legal Shield also. Graphic design. He went to school for that. And my only daughter, she's in Tennessee, and stay-at-home mom. She homeschools her kids. Right. I mean, she's a unique lady. She teaches her kids before they can talk, how to do sign language.
Gotcha.
So, but incredible.
That's awesome.
So
That's
great
awesome.
kids.
That's
They're great kids, though.
So what would, when you think about the entrepreneurship, how would you advise someone to think about, evaluating a new opportunity? Because you had two that failed you. You have one that works well. I'm sure new opportunities come your way all the time.
I had another. I opened up a business in the islands. I lost that traditional one. Like, lost about 90 grand on that one.
90 grand you burned through, you said.
Burned through $90,000 and then came back. And because I took a leave for about 9 months from the department to go down there to start that business.
Okay.
And at that time, the Gulf War started, so that went down.
Right.
So, but came back and opportunities, come in front of you if you're available for them.
Sure.
So I had one that I couldn't partake in, or else I may not be sitting here and talking to you.
Right.
I had a phone call. A gentleman asked me to invest $10,000 in, back then it was called PCS.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, man, I just lost 90. I don't have 10.
Right.
But if I had the vision that now if I knew what was happening, I would have found 10 friends that borrowed $1,000 or 20 to borrow $500 because that ended up being Metro PCS.
Oh, okay. Got it.
So that's like, okay, well, but opportunity is there. And but that was one that I missed out on. But when Legal Shield came in front of us, that was one that we took advantage of. And it's just an incredible opportunity.
Right.
And, entrepreneurship is, I just always believe in working for myself.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I saw my dad being a baker in New York, working for a company, and he developed a dietetic line. He developed a lot of stuff for them, and they wanted to just buy him out, and he refused, and he ended up having to leave that company after working for so many years there.
Right.
And he decided, he came from an entrepreneur family because his father is from St. Vincent, and they had their own bakery. He grew up working in a bakery with his family's bakery, so they've always been in business.
Right.
So that's when he went back. He said he wasn't working for anyone anymore. He started his own bakery, went back to St. Martin.
Gotcha. And
started it with nothing.
Right.
Just from an oven, and I was the only son that could bake at the time. So, I mean, we literally started with 2 regular ovens to start a bakery and developed that into 2 bakeries, one on the Dutch side, one on the French side of the island. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, when I saw my dad do that, I said, I don't want to work for anybody either.
Yeah.
But you have to put bread on the table, and I wasn't hard to work. Right. I wasn't afraid to work, so I always had a job or 2 jobs or 3 jobs, whatever it took, because I always wanted my kids to have what I wanted them to have. But also, I had my street diploma. I grew up in New York.
Right.
But I know that was not the route I wanted to go because I know what inside the jail looked like.
Exactly.
And I've seen friends that I've grown up with. They're not around anymore. They've gone to jail. Some of them are dead. Going down the route, of fast money. And I didn't want that. I didn't want my kids to look up at me as those people that end up in jail. And so I decided I'll just work hard. Right. I had to get 3 jobs. I worked with a young lady, an older woman back in the day in New York that I really admired, Shirley Chisholm. She started one of the first daycare centers. I worked with her in the daycare centers, and that's how I ended up cooking in a daycare center, bookkeeping in a daycare center, doing whatever it was to make that money.
Yes, remember Shirley Chisholm.
Yeah, she was an incredible lady, started the program in inner cities with the daycare centers. So I worked there for a while and got me into working daycare centers. And as I said, I've done all kinds of jobs. Right. Because I needed to work, because I had kids. I dropped out of high school. I didn't graduate from high school. Some people said, I said, no, I dropped out when my wife, my girlfriend got pregnant. And I was 17. So I had to go to work. I didn't believe in welfare and taking, so I went to work. Right. So I was working wherever I could get a job. And I was going to go in the military, and my mom didn't want to sign the papers. I wasn't 18 yet.
Needed her to sign the papers. That's right.
So I ended up getting jobs. So I worked with Shirley Chisholm. Then I ended up working at another daycare center as a cook. And then and being in the environment, I was the type of person, if I'm working somewhere, it's got to be the way it's supposed to be. And when I worked at that daycare center, the kitchen wasn't the way it's supposed to be. So I would stay after and clean and paint. And I painted and redid the whole kitchen. And the director said, "You did all that?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I can't work in here. The kids got to eat. They can't. This is not the way I grew up. I grew up in a bakery that we didn't use no preservatives because we kept everything clean." So she said, "Oh, it was awesome." So when that position was over, it was a temporary position. She turned and said, "Well, the janitor is going on a medical leave. You want to take his position?" So I worked that for a while until he came back. And then he says, "Well, the bookkeeper needs an assistant. Could you help with that?" I said, "Sure." So I went from the kitchen to the maintenance to the bookkeeper assistant, whatever it took, you know, and ended up going back to college, you know, host those community college, played basketball for them because I was a good ball player. And, you know, it probably would end up in the pros. But first day of high school, I got sick and ended up with spinal meningitis.
Oh, man.
And the doctor said that if I wasn't so athletic, I would have died.
Wow.
Because of it. And after that, I couldn't take a light for a while. And then the reason I dropped out of school is because I would go to school. I was on a college-bound program, double English, double Spanish, everything double to get out. And I was already on the first 5 of the basketball team because my brother was playing was a senior there. He was playing, and his coach wanted me to play and put me on the first string. But ended up in the hospital, came out. I was in the hospital for a month. Was home for a month. And when I went back to school, I couldn't remember stuff. My long-term memory was gone.
Wow.
I could be in class, then I get a test in another couple of weeks, and I couldn't remember what. So that really kind of frustrated me. So I ended up dropping out of school.
Gotcha.
Back then, and then girlfriend got pregnant, and all kinds. Then I ended up in the island. So it's it's a long story, but I still came back, and as I said, the first real book that I read after that was "I'm Okay, You're Okay." And that's what got me back on track. That's when I was going to host those, playing ball for them. Ended up on their first. Yeah, that was good.
That's nice.
I don't brag about, but my boy still can't beat me. But I was a good ball player. MVP. I played baseball and basketball, and so all the way through. So played some good tournaments and stuff.
So now as you're bringing up the younger Sardines and focusing on helping them be successful, and you're using everything you've learned from personal leadership development perspective, what are some of the things you tell them as kind of the first priorities from personal leadership development perspective? You kind of the must do's, right? Because that's the takeaways. I think I'm hearing from folks for this episode is, one, you've learned a lot in your time in the Dade County system, right? In terms of how to institutionalize and put those policies in place. And like we talked about with the recidivism, people have to give people a good change dose when they come out, right? They can't go back into that environment. They got to have some dramatic change in order for them not to come back into an incarceration environment, right? But then on the personal leadership development perspective, I'm just curious, like what would be your top 3? These are the things I'm giving my kids, right? These are the must-haves on personal leadership development.
One of the hardest ones,
right?
I can tell you the hardest thing is who you hang around with. That is the biggest challenge because you don't want to stereotype kids because now, they got the dreads, my son now got the ponytail going. So, when we grew up, it was the afro.
Right.
You don't have much afro.
What you trying to say?
But it was the afro and the braids and stuff like that. So you kind of like, so you got to watch how you talk to them because then you'll start pushing them away.
Right.
But it is the people, the first thing is who you hang around with. Because that is, it's such a true saying. My mom, the older people say you hang with the dogs, you get bit by the fleas.
Right.
So, and tell me who your best friends are, I tell you who you are. All those things we hear from the older people, and it's so true to today. It has not changed.
Right.
And that I would say is number one.
Right.
And then getting them plugged in to the personal development, reading the right books that they don't give them in school.
Right.
They do not give them, school is geared for you to work into the system. It's not to work the system.
Right.
And you don't find very few wealthy people will take you under their wing and teach you what it takes.
Right.
But when you have someone in the environment that we're in with the network marketing, you're willing to take someone under your wing and teach them how to develop their own business.
Right.
And the first thing is the personal development.
Yes.
It's getting them around the right people in the environment, getting them to read in the right books.
Right.
And focus on their goals.
Right.
You know, they have to have some goals that they want to accomplish and have a time frame that they want to accomplish them.
Yes.
So all of those things, you know, is what we have to train. And we don't learn that in school.
Yes.
What's the time? The syllabus.
Right. Right.
What classes you got to finish in order to get your degree? That's the only goals that we set.
Right.
It's not, you know, so many kids, like even, you know, like my son Nathaniel, I said, what do you want to do? He doesn't know what he wants to do, to go to school for. He says he wants to help people. He's one of these guys who want to help. So he wants to do social working, help study that, psychology and stuff. But he doesn't really know what, you know, compared to, you know, Danny, he wants to do engineering. He's good at that. Yeah. But he doesn't want to work for anybody. Gotcha. He wants to start his own thing. You know? So it's just getting them who they hang around with, reading the right books, focusing on goals and set a time frame on how to accomplish them, what they need to do to get there. And that's something, you know, school teaches you that somewhat, knowing what you need to study, but half the classes you never use. Right. I mean, what do you use? And my son, Danny, has taken, I think, every math class there is. Something about something equation. I said, what is that? I mean, he sits down and helps older people with their math class. Right. He's just, you know, he's won the awards for drafting and stuff for Florida, came in number 3 in the state and number 1 in the county. So how, you know, for drafting, he'll use those the math skills. But outside of that, if you're not doing that, I mean, I don't remember half of the geometry to that.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
But I remember the personal development books. I remember how the books explain to me why that person's acting that way and how I can now diffuse that. And it helped me a lot with law enforcement. Believe it or not, my personal development helped me so much with law enforcement because training a new generation jailing, you had to actually train the officers how to deal with, you know, with the inmates.
Yes.
And a lot of that was personal development that they didn't realize.
Got it.
But my skills was higher than the skills they were training on, even my trainers. Right. Because of the personal development books that I had read prior to attending those classes. Gotcha. On human behavior. You know, so some of the trainers, I could train them. Yes. Because of the books that I've read and being in the network marketing and dealing with people, you know, reading the books like, you know, How to Win Friends and Influence People. That's a book I believe every high school student should read, and then you have less fights.
That's a great book, absolutely.
You have less fights, so you'll understand why that person is acting that way.
Absolutely. That's Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
So that's one of the first books that, you know, I just recruited a young man that's 27, and I recommended that book for him. He says, I'm reading that now. It's great. But those are the things, the personal development, people you hang around with, setting the goals, and those are just the main focuses, I believe. Good. And know where you want to go. You know? Good. And know why you want to get there. And that's one of the biggest things that I work my business on and creates a success is building a dream. Good. People say, building a dream. What do you want in life? You know, and there's nothing big and nothing too small, nothing too big.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time. It's been
thank
great,
you, and it's an honor because I read your book, and let me tell you, incredible things, and just sharing with you, we're sharing. I believe that this can help. You know, my saying is, if it helps one, it's helped.
Exactly.
That's it. And you know, it's when I'm sharing anything, I used to go into the schools and talk, and you know, when I was an officer, to the middle schools, elementary, even the high schools. And as I said, if it helped one, that's the focus. You know,
that's what we're here to do.
And that's the goal. And I believe we need it because even in the school system, you know, I've had to go into a school and talk to the principal on my son because personal development can be a challenge too with the kids. Because one of my sons, because they've learned that you can have anything you want if you're willing to do the work, right, to get it. And he was in a class, and a couple of kids said that they had an assignment. You know, what do you want to have, and what do you want to do, and what do you want to be? And one kid said that he's going to have, 2 Lamborghinis, and going to have this, and going to have that. And the teacher had the nerve to tell him the only way you're going to get that is if you're a drug dealer. And my son stood up to him and says, "That's not true. What if he became a mechanic and he had a bunch of mechanic shops and now he can afford?" You can't tell him that.
Good for him.
Yeah, but then I had to go to school and talk to the principal. he got sent home because he stood up to the teacher and told the teacher that he was wrong.
Right.
So now he had a challenge, and I had to go talk to the principal. I says, that teacher needs to be counseled and disciplined because if he affected one student in that classroom, is one too many.
Right.
There's no reason that he should have been building that kid up that said he wanted that.
That's right.
And guiding him where he can go to get it.
That's right.
Not telling him where he can go to get it the wrong way.
And set limitations. Right. Set limitations.
So I got.
This is a part of the challenge, right? We're trying to remove these barriers of thought that there's no hope. There are these limitations and barriers that I can't go beyond, right? That's a part of the whole rationale for this program, right? When you look at these, a lot of these kids, you can look into their eyes and see that they've already determined they have no place to go. There is no hope. I have nothing to look forward to, right? And that is a very depressing, we should all be, as adults, as parents, looking at future generations, concerned with that idea that we have youth that are 16, 14, 12, 10, 8, thinking that they have nowhere to go. That's a part of what we want to do here, is help us as adults raise our level of understanding and awareness, and again, actual insight on these topics, so we can then take it down and help in a lot of different ways, particularly on the educational front.
Well, the education is key. I mean, in the jail system, also.
Absolutely.
In the schools, it starts in the schools. I think if we do more in the schools, we have less in the jail.
Absolutely. Oh, no doubt. Absolutely. That's the feeder system, right? We got to fix that.
We have less in the jail, and if we start teaching them that they can accomplish things instead of the wrong way.
Yes.
And the reason that these, you can call them gangs or organizations, whatever it is, out there, because the few, they give more hope and belief to those people out there in the street than we give with what we offer as a community.
Right.
And we need to change that.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's a lot of programs out there, but some people don't know how to get to the programs.
Exactly.
So the programs need to get to the kids.
Exactly.
And there's a lot being done out there, but we need to do more. We really do. I've seen us as working in the jails and for years, and seeing these kids come in there.
Yeah.
And they start off young.
Exactly.
So if we could save some.
Absolutely.
So I really admire what you're doing.
No, thank you for what you've already done.
Now, how old are you?
Let me talk about the camera. So thank you for being on this edition of the Quarterly Solution. Appreciate you being here. Love you. No, man, I'm 46. Thank you for linking up with me for another episode of the Quarterly Solution. You are informed and empowered, and now can be accountable. A few takeaways I took from this episode. Number one, if you have a family member that is incarcerated, you need to be an advocate on multiple fronts. Proper care while within the facility, and assistance in transition upon the release from the facility. Number two, personal leadership development. Always good to get more perspectives, right? Be mindful of your associations. Associations can help elevate you or take you in the opposite direction. And then number three, reading the right books. School is always helpful, but tends to drive us towards blending into a system. We always need to read books that help open up our mindset and prepare us for owning our own. Have a point of view of where you want to go and why you want to get there. So those are my 3 takeaways, but you probably have others. Please share them with me. If you find this podcast to be of value, please subscribe, rate, and review. As you listen to these podcasts, you're going to have questions, hear some things that are new to you, and all of those things are good. I'm here to serve. Go to our website, thecorelinksolution.com, and right below the show notes, you'll see a comment section. You can ask your questions, mention challenges you face in the areas that we cover, and even tell me other guests you'd like to hear from. Alternatively, you can do the same through the social channels of Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Thanks so much for linking up, and I look forward to seeing you next episode.